Okay, you should see my slide deck. Is that right?
Yeah, gone.
Great. So my name is Josh, and I'm kind of filling in here. Our presenter wasn't able to make it, so with Ralph's help, we were able to put together a slide deck, and we were hoping to show folks at least 10 things that they don't know how to do in ATAK. So there's a lot of amazing features in ATAK that I, for one, am always learning about almost every day, especially being on the Discord server. Hoping to share a few of those with everybody. So let's get started. And of course, I'm not going to the next slide deck. Let's try this. Okay, so the first thing is the manual. Most people probably don't even realize that there's an ATAK user manual built right into ATAK. It can be reached by going into settings and then support, and you'll see the ATAK user manual. Also, you'll have the release changelog, which is really cool at keeping up with what are the recent changes in your version of ATAK. There's also a data set instructions, which is a text file that explains where you can put your DTED, your GRG, and your other files. So very handy. I recommend checking those out. The manual is a wealth of information. Next, so now that you've got ATAK and you want to make some custom settings, you want to change some of your settings, the settings menu can be a little daunting. There's just so many options in there, which is great, but you will inevitably probably have a hard time finding that one thing you remember seeing and you can't find it again. Use the search bar up top and start typing out what you can remember. We have a couple of photos here, example of encryption and meshing. And that'll really help you find that location until you get it memorized. Another thing you want to do is save the settings. I think we touched on that on a slide deck later on. But you can save some of your settings and your preferences also to your phone. So next, I think we kind of talked about encryption a little bit, or some of the other speakers did. When ATAK is being used in a mesh environment, so specifically not when connected to a server, not talking about TLS or SSL encryption here, you can actually encrypt the data traffic with AES. So you can define a passkey, passphrase, or whatnot. It's actually a generated key, so you're not actually typing in like a passphrase, excuse me. So you can generate this key, and then you want to make sure you pre-share that with everybody else, and everybody on a, say, an untrusted net. Maybe it's guest Wi-Fi, maybe it's Wi-Fi in an event or something like that. Think of a large coliseum or something like that. You can share your data, your ATAK traffic, and no worries about anybody else seeing anything. Also a good way if you have a giant airsoft event, for example, you could have two teams sharing the same Wi-Fi, and just make sure you change, you guys each have your own keys there, and you can not have to worry about each team seeing each other. Another thing, it can be used on zero tier. Zero tier is a layer 2 VPN that you can use for linking all of your ATAK, even WinTAK, other devices, and is commonly used in the community when you do not want to stand up a server, either a real TAK server or a free TAK server. So you can use it in that scenario as well. I do recommend checking out zero tier. It's a pretty interesting application.
And Josh,
yes, sir.
That link at the bottom of the page takes you to the how to configure zero tier for TAK.
Yes, and so Ralph shared some slides a while ago. He had done a how-to, which really helps someone. This is great for a new team. You're excited about ATAK, you want to bring ATAK to your fire department, your search and rescue department. You don't have any radios or anything like that. You can still use ATAK in a group, in a large group, by using LTE and something like zero tier. You don't have to worry about rolling your own OpenVPN server or anything too technical. Zero tier is very friendly. And again, with the slides, Ralph put together a very good presentation and tutorial how to get tied in with using zero tier. Very interesting, and I highly recommend it for new folks wanting to try out zero tier.
And one more thing,
go ahead.
You can also connect that your home or office network to your phone-based networks. You can have WinTAK and all of your ATAK devices on the same network. Over.
Yeah, and that's actually how I use it myself. I run WinTak here at home, and anytime I'm running ATAK on mine or my wife's phone, we easily just see everybody because we'll have zero tier running in the background. It's very battery friendly, and it's a good alternative if you're just not set up or not ready to run a server implementation on a Pi or Docker, whatever you run. So I definitely recommend checking that out. And I will make these slides available so that you guys can go more in depth on some of these links that we provided. There's going to be some links in the slides further ahead for some much more detailed information that we just can't dive completely down into on the slides. So another awesome feature that most people probably will never even realize it's there, whether you use your finger or you happen to use a pen on your phone. You can double tap and hold, and then you can slide your finger up or down, and that's an easy way to zoom in or out of the map if you don't want to use two fingers for whatever reason. Pretty handy little feature. Also comes in handy later on, you may see as we talk about DeX. So speaking of DeX, this is another one. I'm not going to show the entire video, but Ralph set up a video to explain some of these features and how to start them, and it goes into detail on starting DeX, how to use it, how to use this specific feature. DeX is Samsung specific, and it kind of allows a desktop environment for, you can, for example, send it to your wireless screen. In my case, my TV will support it through, I believe, Chromecast or something like that. So you can wirelessly send a giant version of ATAK to your screen. But then the controls aren't necessarily friendly. One of the settings that you can go in here is enabling DeX friendly controls that really makes a difference. And you'll also get a little slider bar that goes on the left side of your screen right underneath that kind of compass heading deal there. So very, very handy, and I recommend checking it out. And if you have a Samsung phone, that is a DeX enabled phone, I definitely recommend checking it out. It's a pretty cool feature. Also very cool to be able to throw your phone up on a projector or something like that in DeX mode. It's pretty cool.
That slider, especially in portrait mode, though, is awesome, even if you don't have a DeX and you don't have a Samsung.
Very, very cool. And I haven't myself tried it too much. I don't use DeX as much, probably as I should, but it is very cool. And now that I've learned that you can actually change to DeX friendly controls, I think I'll be using it a little bit more. One thing I didn't really notice on all the other slides, I didn't touch on this, is enable globe display mode. This will actually turn, in ATAK, it'll stretch your maps kind of and try to make everything rectangular instead of representing the globe as a real 3D globe. That setting is also one that you may want to try out. You don't get these stretched maps if you're at northern or southern latitudes, so I also recommend checking that out. I didn't really touch on that on the slide. So now that you've got ATAK and you're enjoying it, inevitably you're going to want to add lots of maps. Maybe it's maps for your specific geographic area, your county. Maybe they're maps, any sort, really. Your imagination is the limit there. ATAK is very good at displaying many different types of maps. Some maps are much more intensive than others. GeoTIFF specifically is a very common format to use, and they can be rather large, especially if you've captured your imagery from drones, like Pix4D is mentioned here in Drone Deploy. You can send your drone, capture your entire neighborhood, and get some amazing imagery, much higher detail than what you'd have from, say, Google Maps or anything else publicly available. So the detail is really there, but you'll pay for that in your CPU usage. There is definitely some tools out there such as GDAL, TileMill, Maparative, excuse me, however you pronounce that, that can really streamline your map usage. You can convert them to other formats, such as MB Tiles, SQLite. I think we're going to touch on this on another slide here in a second. But just know that if you are running into some resource limitations potentially with your phone because of large maps, there are some alternatives out there to pre-process those or change those into other map types. An often overlooked tool inside of ATAK is the GeoCam plugin, and Ralph has a pretty good presentation on it here. I'm sure everyone is familiar with being able to take a photo on your phone and also see the tagged information in the EXIF header, potentially of your GPS position. ATAK kind of takes that a step further. I should say GeoCam takes it a step further, and we'll tag some more information, and you can kind of see it in the screenshot here, where you actually get your field of view and other information tied in, and is very useful, especially when you're coming back and looking at these photos, and you want more than just the GPS position. Which way was I looking? What was my angles? What was my field of view? You can mark up all of the imagery, which is incredibly useful. So a lot of folks don't realize that tool is in there. The GeoCam plugin is usually included with ATAK that's in the Play Store. That version doesn't seem to be working for some reason, so we've made Ralph has gone ahead and shared it out here at this location on the slide so that everybody can use it. So now that you have your base layer maps, everyone has added their versions or what's already in there. I want to say OpenStreetMaps, and there's a lot that are included in ATAK, and there's a lot that can be added afterwards. Most folks, when they do that, are adding it as a base layer. So what you see is what you get, and you can't really do overlays unless you consider looking at adding it in a different manner. You can add these definitions or other files in the ATAK GRG folder, and you can overlay other maps on top of your base layer map. So a good representation of this might be, say you were running just satellite imagery as your base layer, but you also want to display maybe a rain layer, or precipitation layer, or a traffic layer to be able to overlay that. Really, again, your imagination is the limit. You can stack the different imagery, and I want to say you can only do these two stacks, that is a base layer and another layer on top of that. And you can use it in very different formats, from GeoTIFFs, you can adjust your transparencies and everything else. Very handy feature, trying to overlay whatever map you might need. We're going to touch more on this in a second on another slide, but if you're on a fire or something like that and you want to overlay your park boundaries or current fire boundaries, whatever it might be, there's a lot of options there besides just the standard base layer maps.
You can overlay as many layers as you want, but it gets
Awesome.
useless after the second. After you've added the first one plus the base layer, it's pretty much useless.
Maybe we'll expand on that in ATAK later, because I definitely think layers is a important feature. And just being able to add 2 layers, though, really, really helps out. Along with the layers functionality, we're kind of bringing us into the next one, which is building layouts. So you can take let's just say a regular building layout, such as what's shown here, whether it's your house, a stadium, whatever you need. You can take it as a JPEG, that is, so no geo-rectified information built into a JPEG by default. You can take an image that has no size or geo information built into it. You can use the rubber sheet tool, which is included in ATAK, to geo-rectify it. That means place it on a map and make it scale proper. You can see in this case that it's scaled to match its satellite imagery. And you can, maybe that's an internal map, maybe that's a call out of layer or the first level of a building, the second layer of a building, whatever you might have. Extremely helpful tool. We also have a tutorial linked here from Ralph as well. So highly recommend it, very cool. And imagine if you had like I think his tutorial shows it, a park, for example, a park map. Any sort of map or whatever you want to bring in, you can bring into ATAK, even if it's not geo-rectified, even if it's not a GeoTIFF or anything like that. Pretty handy.
Yesterday, I had to go to a big building I'd never been to before. So as I went in, I just took a picture of the emergency exit plan and plopped it in like this, and I had the whole thing easily rectified for the day.
Awesome. And I mean, you can do it with malls or whatever you need. We had a tutorial, a testimonial of a person that I believe he was a firefighter that was mentioned previously. You can easily overlay that. They were operating in a school. You can easily overlay the school layout if you have that available. So that might help. Show all the room numbers. Very handy stuff.
And Josh, I know that you started later because of me, so I take responsibility, but only to inform you that we have the last 5 minutes.
copy that. I'm gonna squeeze through these really quick. So I won't touch on every single aspect. One thing to know in ATAK is you can bring in all sorts of different video feeds. As an example here, I've used my home security feed. It's an RTSP stream. RTSP streams come from many different security cameras, IP cameras for your home, NVRs, such as Wise cams, stuff like that. There's functionality in there. You can basically bring your video feeds into ATAK. Definitely something to check out. So initially this presentation was 10 things. We have a few more. I guess I'll use up a little bit of the time and then try to save some for QA. And sorry, Corvo, how much time do we have there? Just about 4 minutes?
Oh, let's say 5 minutes because you started late.
Okay, well, these will go pretty quick. We're in the home stretch. So one of the things you can change if you want to customize ATAK, you can adjust or make your own splash screen and about screen. You can basically just place your PNG file in the ATAK support folder, make sure it's named properly, and you can get your own little customized version of ATAK. Pretty cool little feature. The toolbar. Most people don't realize that you can customize the toolbar. The steps here define how to get in there, remove or replace, edit, rearrange the toolbar, and then you can also export and save those settings. So that you don't have to redo that every time you're wiping out ATAK or adding it to a new phone and whatnot. GPX tracks. All these next slides are going to kind of be similar. Track history, GPX, and routes are all very similar terminology, but different pieces. In ATAK, as you're running around, you're going to generate a track history. That track history can be exported. Either you can set it up before or after your trips. But you can create a GPX file. You can later use those GPX files to make routes. Where did I go? Is this going to be a route I'm going to use every day? Is that my commute back and forth to work? Or maybe it's a hiking trail. You can definitely use these GPX files and very handy to know how to work with those. With those GPX files, if you want to simulate a route in ATAK, you can actually run a separate outside application called Liquido. And you can download that from the Play Store. You'll put your phone in developer mode, and then you can create a route inside of Liquido, and it will actually try to trace the roads if you select road. And you can then hit play, and you will fake GPS location to ATAK, and ATAK will pretend to basically go down a route. Very handy for simulating, testing, and so forth. Just maybe you're trying to learn functionality inside of ATAK. Maybe you, for some reason, don't want people to know where your position is on ATAK and you want to fake it. Pretty cool tool. Zello, and I'll try to wrap up here really quick here, Corvo. So Zello is not built into ATAK, but if you are a new team and trying to use ATAK, if you do not have handheld radios, one of the things you're looking for usually to coordinate with other folks is, in addition to ATAK, is some way to have voice comms. So Zello is a great free tool that you can basically make a channel, a net, so to speak, and be able to communicate with your peers. Discord also offers this functionality, but you can create a PTT button that overlays on top of ATAK, and you don't have to get out of ATAK like you would normally into an application. You wouldn't have to bounce between the two applications to talk. So being able to throw a PTT button over top of ATAK, you stay inside of ATAK and keep that SA, and you don't drop out of it. Cool feature that you might want to check out if you're looking at either of those apps, Zello or Discord.
And by the way, Josh, we have a user called Wesley, aka Goss, that managed to connect a real Baofeng with Zello.
Yes.
So that you have IP to rear radio connection. And
yes.
I tried that. It's really super, super cool.
Yeah, and your imagination is the limit on that too. I mean, you can bridge back and forth with ROIP, VoIP, whatever you want to call it, but there's definitely some cool things that the users in the community have created, and this kind of goes hand in hand with it. Another thing, once you've got ATAK and you have a large amount of imagery, you can use tools such as the data sync tool, I want to say, that is inside of TAK server. If you do not have access to a TAK server, you can use something like Resilio Sync or SyncThing to sync large amounts of maps, just basically almost effortlessly between all of your groups of phones and your PCs potentially running OpenTak. It works for other things besides map files, DTED. You can even share like your mesh encryption key. So imagine you want to rotate your keys. You literally just change a file on one phone and it spits it out to all the rest that have connectivity. It really makes syncing all of your devices with that type of data pretty easy. One thing to note, do not sync the entire ATAK folder. You'll have issues if you do that. All the phones won't want to talk together. And we're in the home stretch here. Quitting without confirming. Most folks, when you're trying to exit ATAK, you forget that you need to go up to the little buttons up in the corner and actually choose exit. You can actually change it so that you don't have to do that, and ATAK won't remain running in the background. So folks that you don't want to leave it and forget ATAK running in the background if you don't select the proper way to exit. You can also turn on Gridlines by default. It's another setting. Just go ahead and search for grid inside the settings menu. And I'm going to kind of probably end it here. I don't want to go too much further. I want to see how many slides that we have left. That's pretty much it. So this is a tutorial on how to get DTED. We have the entire world's worth of DTED 0. You can also get specific areas. Please come back and look at this slide and the tutorials in here if you're interested in loading 3D terrain data. It really takes ATAK a step further. Lastly, that same elevation data you can use, you can view a heat map, which would show you kind of a rainbow color map that would detail your height in the terrain height in your area. Very handy feature. This is one of the most important slides, I think, in the entire deck. Without users that are giving back to the community, whether it's something like a translation, filling out a spreadsheet and being able to translate into another native language, submitting your crash logs to the developers, improving the wiki, anything like that. Any way you can give back to the community, please don't hesitate. Those folks on Discord are definitely willing to help through the process. Any way we can make TAK better is really going to grow the community. So please do consider that. There's so many ways to contribute. And with that, that is going to be the end of the presentation. I don't think we have much time for questions.
Yeah, we are already 3 minutes over the time. Thank you for taking some time off. Again, I apologize that I went over time, but no one stopped me.
No problem. No, I want to thank Ralph for really doing a majority of these slides. Thank you for your time with that, Ralph, your time and your help. I really appreciate it. And thanks, Corvo, for putting this together.
You're very welcome.